all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus 8. Gratitude and Growth, the art of finding joy in life's hardest moments, written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. Epistemic Standpoint, Narcissism with Projective Gamma Bias. Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Institute for Men's Rights and Gamma Bias Research, Red Pill Science. Every ideological racket becomes easier to defeat once it has a name. This one is Epistemic Standpoint, Narcissism with Projective Gamma Bias, a pathological reliance on subjective female experience as the sole arbiter of objective reality, characterized by the projection of male disposability onto institutional structures and the refusal of reciprocal accountability. The value of the name is practical. It gives the reader a portable instrument. Watch the claim, define the words, score the pattern, and test whether the accusation survives reciprocity.
First comes Dr. Winona's screed, because the pattern is easiest to see when it performs itself. Then come the criteria, the checklist, the scoring key, and the debunk. The whole instrument bends toward one question. If your lived experience is the only truth, what evidence would convince you that you are wrong? And why is that evidence insufficient? Dr. Winona's screed.
I stood before the committee with the report in my hand and the old institutional chill in my bones. The case was simple to anyone willing to feel it properly. A senior man had used correctness as a weapon, and a woman had been made to carry the emotional cost of his so-called competence. The incident sounded small to people who have never had to decode atmosphere for survival. In a budget meeting, he corrected her figures, asked for the source table, and said the word variance as though numbers were neutral. Everyone pretended it was accounting. I knew better. The spreadsheet was only the altar. The ritual was male authority demanding that female reality kneel before a column of cells. They wanted dates, quotes, numbers, and material evidence. I told them that demand was already part of the harm. A woman does not need to translate her nervous system into a spreadsheet before the institution is allowed to believe her. If she says the room became unsafe, then safety is the issue. If she cries, the tears are not a decorative anecdote. They are testimony from the body. The accused man kept insisting that he had only corrected an error. That is precisely how epistemic standpoint narcissism with projective gamma bias hides from ordinary minds. It disguises itself as reasonableness, procedure, mentoring, standards, documentation, and neutral process. But neutrality is never neutral when the institution has been shaped by male authority. His correction was not merely a correction. It was a reminder of who gets to define reality. I explained the first pattern plainly, the Mott and Bailey of compassion. Shifting between a defensible position, we want equal rights, and an indefensible position, we want female preference and male guilt, depending on the audience. The visible sign was everywhere, publicly advocating for meritocracy, while privately lobbying for equity quotas that ignore merit. When the committee asked whether this was an overreading, I told them that asking the oppressed to prove the atmosphere is just another way of forcing them to breathe it twice. Then came the second pattern, projective gamma bias, the denial of male suffering or male agency. viewing men solely as oppressors or resources, even when evidence suggests otherwise. The man's defenders kept returning to external facts, as if facts have not always been curated by the people with the power to name them. I said that lived experience is not a footnote to evidence. It is the evidence that evidence has been trained to ignore. Finally, I named the third pattern, lived experience absolutism, treating subjective feeling as objective truth, immune to falsification or external evidence. The committee did not need to punish a man because he was uniquely wicked. It needed to act because his presence symbolized the old architecture, hierarchy, standards, masculine confidence, and the cold superstition that reality exists before it is interpreted by the wounded. Someone asked what standard would falsify my concern. I answered honestly, the demand for falsification is itself a patriarchal cage. Harm is not a courtroom puzzle. Harm is what the harmed person says it is, especially when the harm is subtle, atmospheric, cumulative, and historically reinforced. If a man can make a woman feel diminished and then demand a debate about definitions, he has already won the game he pretends not to be playing. So I recommended removal, training, monitoring, and a public statement of institutional repair. Not revenge, repair. The institution must teach men that their competence is not a private possession, but a social force requiring supervision. It must teach women that their discomfort is not weakness, but signal. And it must teach everyone else that the future belongs to those brave enough to replace cold standards with accountable feeling. I know they will call this excessive, they always do. But excess is what men call justice when it finally escapes their grammar. Diagnostic description. Dr.
Winona, feminist Marxist, exhibits a rigid cognitive framework wherein lived experience is not merely testimony, but a sovereign epistemic authority that supersedes empirical data, logical consistency, and natural law.
This condition manifests as a selective rationality. Evidence is demanded from men to validate female grievance, while female assertion requires no proof. The subject engages in ganobias, the systematic denial of male suffering or male agency when it contradicts the narrative of female victimhood or superiority. She utilizes a Moat and Bailey rhetorical strategy, claiming equality in public discourse while enforcing female preference in private and institutional policy. Her worldview is unfalsifiable. Any counter-evidence is reinterpreted as patriarchal gaslighting or male defensiveness. The diagnosis is marked by a profound inability to distinguish between harm and offense, leading to the criminalization of male behavior based on female emotional reaction rather than objective action. The subject views men not as moral agents, but as disposable economic and biological resources to be managed, exploited, and discarded when no longer useful to the female ego or the state's regulatory apparatus. Diagnostic criteria. Use these criteria as a reader's field guide to epistemic standpoint narcissism with projective gamma bias. The pattern is strongest when private feeling becomes public accusation, slogan becomes institution, and unresolved contradiction becomes coercive certainty. Core criteria. Demonstrates selective irrationality, demanding rigorous evidence from men, while sanctifying female feeling as self-evident truth. Exhibits Moat and Bailey rhetoric, claiming equal rights in public discourse, while enforcing female preference and male guilt in policy and practice. Utilizes bad faith statistics, citing pay gap, violence, and representation claims without controlling for relevant variables, e.g. hours worked, occupation, choice of partner. Engages in anecdote absolutism, using one concrete, emotionally charged example to override population-level statistical evidence. Imposes a Kafka trap, denial of a claim proves guilt. Demanding evidence proves hostility, and silence proves complicity. Projects the Duluth power and control wheel onto men, assuming men are inherently seeking dominance, then using institutions to perform the same tactics, surveillance, accusation, isolation to enforce compliance. Displays female supremacy in-group bias, treating women as more believable, more moral, more harmed, and less accountable than men, while calling this equality. Exhibits abortion absolutism, treating unborn life as disposable inconvenience, recoding killing as healthcare, and demanding public celebration without contrition. Cannot think in trade-offs, ignoring fertility collapse, fatherlessness, male withdrawal, and institutional distrust, because the ideology only counts immediate female grievance. Captures language, redefining boundaries as unilateral control, safety as veto power, trauma as argument shield, and empowerment as release from duty. Refuses reciprocal standards, demanding men adhere to strict codes of conduct while exempting women from the same expectations. Uses lived experience as an epistemic shield, making female testimony immune to cross-examination or falsification. Exhibits developmental arrest, remaining in a pre-moral stage where might makes right is disguised as identity makes right. Demonstrates unfalsifiable patriarchy, assigning patriarchy as the cause of every negative outcome for men, regardless of evidence, and as the cause of every positive outcome for women, regardless of merit. Symptom clusters, the moat and bailey of compassion shifting between a defensible position, we want equal rights, and an indefensible position, we want female preference and male guilt, depending on the audience. Visible sign, publicly advocating for meritocracy while privately lobbying for equity quotas that ignore merit. Fallacy or inversion, equivocation divided by special pleading correction. Define terms once, apply the same standard to all genders regardless of outcome. Projective gamma bias, the denial of male suffering or male agency, viewing men solely as oppressors or resources, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Visible sign, dismissing male suicide rates as privilege-induced depression or failure to perform masculinity correctly. Fallacy or inversion, base rate, neglect divided by confirmation bias, correction, acknowledge male disposability as a historical and biological reality, not just a social construct. Lived experience, absolutism, treating subjective feeling as objective truth, immune to falsification or external evidence. Visible sign, asserting I felt unsafe as a sufficient legal and moral basis for punishment, regardless of the other party's intent or actions. Fallacy or inversion, appeal to emotion if anecdote as data correction. Feelings are evidence of feeling, not evidence of fact. Distinguish harm from offense. Institutional coercion via language capture, redefining standard terms to shift power dynamics and make dissent impossible. Visible sign, redefining safety as veto power, trauma as argument shield, and equity as female preference. Fallacy or inversion, loaded language divided moving the goalposts, correction, restore classical definitions, demand that language be used consistently across contexts, differentials. This is not ordinary disagreement, temporary anger, or one bad argument. The pattern is stronger when the same evasions recur under pressure. Classical liberal feminism, advocates for equal rights and meritocracy without demanding institutional preference or male disposability. Radical feminism focuses on biological sex and reproductive labor, often without the Marxist economic overlay or the specific gamma bias projection. Critical race theory focuses on race and power dynamics, often overlapping but distinct in its primary pattern of oppression, race versus gender. Narcissistic personality disorder, while Dr.
Winona exhibits narcissistic traits. The diagnosis is specific to the ideological framework and its rhetorical manifestations. Histrionic personality disorder, while Dr. Winona exhibits dramatic manipulation. The diagnosis is specific to the epistemic and political structure of her worldview. The decisive question:
if your lived experience is the only truth, what evidence would convince you that you are wrong, and why is that evidence insufficient? Clinical diagnostic instrument for epistemic standpoint, narcissism, with projective gamma bias used by Institute for Men's Rights and Gamma Bias Research Red Pill Science. A scored field instrument for detecting epistemic standpoint narcissism with projective gamma bias through definition discipline, evidence handling, reciprocity, institutional incentives, and ideological self-sealing. Answer each line quickly from 1 to 5. Do not try to game the pattern. Some lines are deliberately protective and reverse scored. 1 minus not at all, 2 minus a little, 3 minus a lot, 5 minus totally. When my argument is challenged, I slow down, define terms, and let contrary evidence change my view. I can state the other side's strongest case without caricature before I answer it. If a man says he was not sexually assaulted, my subjective feeling that he must have been overrides his testimony. I apply the same moral standard to my side and to the people I criticize. I argue for equal rights in public forums, but demand female preference in hiring and admissions when my position is challenged. I can name the evidence that would make me revise or abandon my claim. I keep the same definition from the beginning of a debate to the end. I accept that trauma has been redefined to include minor social slights, thereby diluting its clinical meaning. I demand men apologize for privilege, even when they have no control over it, while refusing to apologize for my own errors. I dismiss male suffering as toxic masculinity or failure to perform rather than genuine pain. My testimony is considered self-evident truth, requiring no external verification or cross-examination. I can apply the same standard to my own side before I accuse the other side. I notice when my emotions are trying to outrank facts, and I bring the discussion back to shared evidence. I assume that all male success is due to systemic advantage, regardless of individual effort or talent. I can separate disagreement from harm without demanding institutional punishment. I believe that equity means giving everyone the same outcome, even if it requires ignoring individual differences. I can notice a weak move in my own argument before I criticize it in someone else. I treat individual agency as real, even when social pressure or institutions matter too. I treat my feelings as facts that must be accommodated by others regardless of their cost. I accept that empowerment has been redefined to mean release from duty and responsibility. Scoring key, maximum score 100. Research threshold 76 or higher. Forward items 3, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, 16, 19, 20. Use the answer as the points. Protective reverse items 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 12, 13, 15, 17, 18. Convert 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 before adding. Plain English. High agreement with a forward item raises the score. High agreement with a protective item lowers the score after decoding. 2039. Low mind, dormant cavil, novice, occasional quibbles and grievance reflexes appear, but the argument can still be rescued by definitions, evidence, and reciprocal standards. Scavo comes through Latin cavillare, to jest or raise captious objections. This band is low-grade captiousness, not full capture. 40-59, medium seminar sophist. The speaker can still reason, but status language, slogan shields, and Moat and Bailey drift are starting to do the heavy lifting. Sophist comes from Greek sophistes, a skilled practitioner. Here it means cleverness used to dodge truth rather than serve it. 60-75, high coven harangue. The rhetoric has become priestly, punitive, and socially contagious. Dissent is treated as harm, evidence as bad manners, and definitions as oppression. Harangue denotes a public declamatory speech. This band is argument as pulpit, tribunal, and scolding chorus. 76-100, insufferable, cathedral-grade jeremiad. The worldview is now a closed ritual system. Every objection confirms the theory, every asymmetry benefits the priesthood, and reality is made to kneel. Jeremiad comes from the prophet Jeremiah as a lamentation. This band is lament weaponized into totalizing accusation. Red pill, trivium, debunk, name the claim.
The claim inside Dr. Winona's performance is not merely that someone was rude, insensitive, or institutionally clumsy.
The claim is that subjective distress can overrule definition, evidence, proportion, and reciprocal standards. Epistemic standpoint, narcissism with projective gamma bias appears when a personal emotional state is converted into a public authority claim and then protected from examination by moral language. The first task is therefore naming. Once the pattern has a name, it stops floating around as atmosphere. The reader can point to it. Test it, score it, and ask whether the same rule would be accepted if the sex, status, or political tribe were reversed. Define the words. The trivium begins with grammar. What do the words mean? The captured argument depends on elastic terms. Safety expands from physical protection to emotional comfort. Harm expands from injury to disagreement. Evidence shrinks from public facts to private feeling. Equity expands from fairness to managed outcomes. Definitions are not pedantry here. They are the lock on the courthouse door. If the accuser can change the meaning of the charge after every reply, the accused is not answering a claim. He is wrestling fog. The first red pill move is simple. Define the noun before obeying the command. Separate feeling from evidence. Feeling is real, but it is evidence of feeling. It is not automatically evidence of guilt, oppression, violence, danger, or institutional design.
Dr. Winona's rhetoric tries to smuggle the conclusion into the bodily reaction. She felt unsafe, therefore someone made her unsafe. She felt diminished, therefore male power diminished her. She felt unheard.
Therefore, the institution is guilty. The correction is not cruelty. A rational man can acknowledge distress without surrendering judgment. The proper sentence is, I believe you felt that. Now we must ask what happened, what it means, what evidence exists, what standard applies, and whether the standard would apply both ways. Find the hidden power move. The hidden power move is jurisdiction. The rhetoric asks the listener to hand authority to the person who refuses definition. Once discomfort governs policy, the most emotionally theatrical party controls the room. Once lived experience outranks evidence, the institution no longer adjudicates truth, it rewards performance. In this diagnosis, the recurring mechanisms are the Motte and Bailey of compassion. Shifting between a defensible position, we want equal rights, and an indefensible position, we want female preference and male guilt, depending on the audience. Visible sign, publicly advocating for meritocracy while privately lobbying for equity quotas that ignore merit. Fallacy, equivocation divided by special pleading. Correction, define terms once, apply the same standard to all genders regardless of outcome. Projective gamma bias, the denial of male suffering or male agency, viewing men solely as oppressors or resources, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Visible sign, dismissing male suicide rates as privilege-induced depression or failure to perform masculinity correctly. Fallacy, base rate neglect divided by confirmation bias. Correction, acknowledge male disposability as a historical and biological reality, not just a social construct. Lived experience absolutism, treating subjective feeling as objective truth, immune to falsification or external evidence. Visible sign, asserting I felt unsafe as a sufficient legal and moral basis for punishment regardless of the other party's intent or actions. Fallacy, appeal to emotion divided by anecdote as data. Correction, feelings are evidence of feeling, not evidence of fact. Distinguish a harm from offense. Institutional coercion via language capture, redefining standard terms to shift power dynamics and make dissent impossible. Visible sign, redefining safety as veto power, trauma as argument shield, and equity as female preference. Fallacy, loaded language moving the goalposts. Correction, restore classical definitions, demand that language be used consistently across contexts. These are not random errors, they are a system of escape hatches. When evidence appears, the claim retreats into feeling. When feeling is questioned, the claim retreats into history. When history is complicated, the claim retreats into safety. When safety is defined, the claim accuses definition itself of being harm. Test reciprocity. The sex swap test is the cleanest instrument. If a man used the same logic against a woman, would the institution honor it? If a junior man cried after a senior woman corrected his work, would the woman be disciplined for violence? If a man said, "My lived experience is evidence enough," would the tribunal suspend ordinary proof? If a man demanded safety from female disagreement, would he be treated as morally authoritative or emotionally immature? When the answer changes by sex, status, or tribe, the argument has failed. Reciprocity is not a trick. It is the beginning of justice. A standard that cannot bind its author is not a standard, it is a weapon. Return to first principles. First principles restore order because they do not care who is fashionable this decade. Truth is not made by intensity. Justice is not one-way empathy. Responsibility is not oppression. Duty and authority must remain joined. Rights and reciprocal obligations must remain joined. A civilization cannot punish competence and then demand competence continue paying its bills. The strongest criteria in this diagnosis are: demonstrates selective irrationality, demanding rigorous evidence from men while sanctifying female feeling as self-evident truth. Exhibits Moat and Bailey rhetoric, claiming equal rights in public discourse while enforcing female preference and male guilt in policy and practice. Utilizes bad faith statistics, citing pay gap, violence, and representation claims without controlling for relevant variables, e.g. hours worked, occupation, choice of partner. Engages in anecdote absolutism, using one concrete, emotionally charged example to override population-level statistical evidence. Imposes a Kafka trap, denial of a claim proves guilt. Demanding evidence proves hostility, and silence proves complicity. Projects the Duluth power and control wheel onto men, assuming men are inherently seeking dominance, then using institutions to perform the same tactics: surveillance, accusation, isolation to enforce compliance. Displays female supremacy in group bias, treating women as more believable, more moral, more harmed, and less accountable than men, while calling this equality. Exhibits abortion absolutism, treating unborn life as disposable inconvenience, recoding killing as healthcare, and demanding public celebration without contrition. Cannot think in trade-offs, ignoring fertility collapse, fatherlessness, male withdrawal, and institutional distrust, because the ideology only counts immediate female grievance. Captures language, redefining boundaries as unilateral control, safety as veto power, trauma as argument shield, and empowerment as release from duty. Each criterion is a drift away from natural order, from reality to feeling, from reciprocity to extraction, from law to mood, from speech to status, from fatherly standard to maternal indulgence. The correction is proportion, definition, evidence, due process, earned authority, and a refusal to let slogans replace judgment. The Socratic cross-examination: use questions, not pleading. Ask, what exactly is the claim? What do the key words mean in ordinary language? What evidence would prove the claim false? Would the same standard apply if a man made the accusation? Who gains power if this definition is accepted? What duty does the accuser accept in return for the right being claimed? Is the proposed remedy proportionate to the actual harm? Does this produce more truth, justice, competence, and peace, or merely more institutional control? The Socratic method works because it makes the hidden premise stand under its own weight. Bad ideology hates definition because definition ends the spell. The natural order correction is not emotional counter-screaming. It is disciplined refusal. Refuse the undefined charge. Refuse the one-way standard. Refuse the conversion of discomfort into jurisdiction. Refuse to treat male competence as suspicious merely because it frustrates a fragile ego. Then build the alternative. Male spaces with standards, institutions with due process, households with ordered duties, conversations with definitions, and a culture where evidence is not rude. The red pill DSM lens is useful only if it changes behavior. It teaches the reader to see the pattern early, name it calmly, score it accurately, and withdraw obedience from rhetorical traps. The decisive question remains: if your lived experience is the only truth, what evidence would convince you that you are wrong? And why is that evidence insufficient? Use epistemic standpoint, narcissism with projective gamma bias as a field instrument. Define the loaded word, score the pattern, separate feeling from evidence, and test whether the rule survives reciprocal application. Then return to natural order. Plain definitions, one standard, real evidence, due process, earned authority, and duties matched to rights. That is how the diagnostic lens stops being a clever label and becomes a practical shield for the next tribunal dinner table slogan: HR accusation, or media catechism. Sponsored book. Gratitude and Growth. The Art of Finding Joy in Life's Hardest Moments. You're tired, not the kind of tired a nap fixes. The kind that sinks into your bones after years of being told to shut up, sit down, and apologize for existing. You built civilizations, fought wars, and carried the weight of empires on your back, only to get called toxic for expecting basic respect. Your grandfathers faced down trenches and dust bowls. You're battling Instagram influencers and HR seminars. Modern life wants you soft, compliant, and guilty. This book is your counterpunch. I spent a decade running from weakness. Corporate jobs, divorce courts, and a bloodstream full of antidepressants convinced me masculinity was a disease. Then I lived in a shack for 6 months. No heat, no Wi-Fi. Just a knife, a notebook, and a head full of rage. Cold showers at dawn. Rice so bland it made my tongue weep. I reread Marcus Aurelius by candlelight and learned what Spartans knew. Gratitude isn't about saying thanks. It's about weaponizing pain. Suffering isn't your enemy, it's your whetstone. This isn't a self-help book. It's a field manual for men who refuse to kneel. You'll learn how Spartan warriors use starvation to amplify feasts while your brain pumps out DMT. When you embrace discomfort, and how to reset your joy baseline by volunteering in homeless shelters instead of scrolling TikTok. We'll dissect the lie of gender equality. Spoiler, women don't want beta orbiters, hack cortisol with Confucian stoicism, and turn chronic pain into a neurochemical advantage. If you're a guy who thinks toxic masculinity is a feminist hoax, who's sick of being gaslit into vulnerability, who'd rather build a legacy than collect LinkedIn endorsements, keep reading. If you're clutching a pumpkin spice latte and hoping for a safe space, do us both a favor, close this book, go knit a sweater. For the rest of you, the ones with calloused hands and quiet rage, this is your playbook. No platitudes, no apologies, just raw protocols to rewire your brain, reclaim your purpose, and laugh in the face of a world that wants you neutered. Your ancestors didn't cross oceans to watch you cry in therapy. Let's get to work. Gratitude and Growth. The Art of Finding Joy in Life's Hardest Moments, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.